saying that he named the company after his kid at investor pitches. Rich old ladies. They thought it was very cute, you know. Write checks for Lex.
Lex Luthor?
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Greetings and salutations, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, the Infuso. And I'm here to talk to you about my least favorite Lex Luthor, Jesse Eisenberg. It's almost as if when they were casting this character, the vision for the villain was to not be the antithesis of Superman, but instead the antithesis of Lex Luthor, because this performance is so off-brand. Lex Luthor is a three-dimensional man, corrupted by and obsessed with power. Despite not being a superpowered threat, his natural abilities make him Superman's deadliest foe. Lex Luthor is incredibly intelligent. He's a politician, a man in power consumed and corrupted by that very power, going to further and further lengths to keep it. He symbolizes strength and a desperate need for superiority. He's a narcissistic sociopath with an ego the size of Krypton, a complete control freak who exudes intensity. Suffice it to say, he has a very naturally commanding presence, approaching each and every situation with the utmost confidence, as if he's in control at every given minute, even when he's not. So, who hears that description and thinks, oh, Jesse Eisenberg? For sure, it's gotta be Jesse. He just doesn't fit the bill, and I think the results kind of speak for themselves. Nonetheless, I'm gonna try to spare a few words here, because it's kind of my job. This is the exact opposite of what you'd hope to see in a Lex Luthor. This Lex Luthor is a snarky, smarmy little prick. A self-indulgent nerd whose mouth moves faster than his mind.
No. No, what am I? What was I saying? No.
He was both an annoyance to the viewers watching the movie and the characters who were living it out. He's a small, sad little man whose fortune still isn't enough to match his misfortune. He's just an over-the-top theatrical little daddy's boy living in his famous father's shadow. This is supposed to be Lex Luthor, not Max Landis. In the past, I've likened this Lex Luthor to feeling like an evil Zooey Deschanel. I shouldn't need to use the word quirky to accurately describe a Lex Luthor performance. And sometimes it just feels like he's absurd for absurdity's sake. He's crying over the corpse of a Kryptonian who, mind you, he despises, while quoting Icarus? Yeah, that sounds just like Lex Luthor. Yeah, for sure. That's great writing. That's awesome. I question a lot of it and where it was going. Never once does he come across as threatening or frightening, even in his most horrific and horrid moments. This Lex Luthor is just hilariously goofy. He's a mousy maniac madman who speaks in speeches that somehow both feel incredibly overprepared, but also absolutely underprepared. Lex Luthor should never come across as an annoyance, as a pestering little twit that you want to shove into a locker. But here, that's what we get. A billionaire brat. A spoiled rich kid who is every bit as condescending as he is cringeworthy. Quite frankly, I put him on the same level as the DCEU's Joker.
I could tell you meant that.
And can we talk about that for a minute? How these movies basically gave us the worst interpretations of two of the biggest bad guys they had? World's finest! These are the world's worst. Luthor's outright disgust for Kryptonians, viewing them as a blight to humanity, is not really addressed. In its place is an emphasis on a general irritation at Superman's sudden popularity. Most of the movie, he's acting like a child. And that's really off-putting if you're familiar with the actual character. Because while Lex Luthor's issues may come from a relatively immature place, you know, his whole thought process boils down to you're different, so you're bad, and people need to know that I'm important. Despite his immature mentality, he himself is not openly immature. He rationalizes his insecurity, and with his gift of the gab, tries to turn the public against Metropolis's favorite protector. He's not some spoiled snob who's loudly seeking attention and validation. Lex approaches his issues with premeditated aggression and spiteful passion, mostly handling his problems in secret unless he's trying to make some sort of statement or example. This Lex is so up in your face and just overall loud that he might as well be announcing all of his evil plans on a megaphone, blatantly explaining his actions and the motivations behind them. It just sort of feels like he's desperate to be heard. But being as he's a gazillionaire socialite, you would think that he's more than used to being listened to. It's not even the fact that he didn't act the part, he also didn't look the part. Aesthetically, nothing about him ever screamed Lex Luthor to me. He didn't dress the way the character traditionally dresses. He didn't have the character's signature hair or, lack thereof. There was nothing about him that resembled the character that he was supposed to be playing. I know he eventually gets his head shaved, but honestly, it was too little too late. By the time he got a haircut, the movie was already over. Even when he was later given the suit in the end credits of Justice League, it just really wasn't connecting. He didn't look like the character, he looked like somebody in cosplay. Ultimately, what you end up with, even in the Ultimate Edition, is a Lex Luthor who never really authentically felt like Lex Luthor. He's just someone filling in for that part, and doing their own thing. I understand going a different route with a character, that's totally valid. But if you're gonna go in a completely different direction with a completely different destination in mind, is it even the same trip? Am I supposed to applaud the studio for defying my expectations and giving me a terrible rendition of a classic? I'm all for allowing artists to do different things with classic characters, but at what point does it just become something else entirely? There is almost nothing to this portrayal that actually resembles the fictional entity that it's based on. This wasn't Lex Luthor. It felt like a completely different character who just so happened to share the same name and status as the comic book character. It doesn't even feel like the DCEU was ever too confident with their choice in casting or characterization. Making Lex a junior and making his deceased father, Lex Sr., felt like a little bit of a cop-out. This was the movie's way of having their cake and eating it too. By having this be so far removed from the actual Lex we know, and having a senior in place, we could just explain it away by saying this isn't supposed to be that Lex. It's his son! The first Lex Luthor was that Lex Luthor. This is a different guy. Lacking the depth and nuances of Superman's archenemy, Jesse Eisenberg really just comes off as a generic proverbial villain. He is just rich bad guy. That's it. Forgive me for repeating myself here, but I think my biggest issue with this is that it's so far removed from the actual character that it felt like they were intentionally trying to make him the polar opposite of the primary source. He had next to nothing in common with the character that he was playing. So this Lex Luthor just wasn't for me, and I don't understand the few fans that he does have. But I want to say, there are some positives amongst these negatives. It isn't all bad, it's just mostly bad. And what's bad is really, really, really bad. Nonetheless, this universe does get some things right about the character. How he selfishly and carelessly uses people as pawns, even the few that are close to him, is completely reminiscent of the Man of Today. I think they properly portrayed his cold and callous nature, how there's nothing that means anything to him outside of whatever his current goal is. Despite the deviations in his depiction, his motivations in large stay mostly the same. His issues with Superman still come from a place of insecurity, and a need to be better than all those around him, and most importantly, be seen as being better than all those around him. His issues with Superman still come from a place of insecurity, and a need to be better than all those around him, and most importantly, to be seen as being better than all those around him. The character's intellect is often on display, but there's an issue with the way they chose to display it. He's so insistent on proving that he's the smartest man in the room that it usually ends up making him the butt of the joke. He plans 10 steps ahead, but he also has to leave hints and clues that he's ahead of the game. His hatred for Superman is still out of jealousy that he masks through other narratives to justify his hatred. So when we're getting down to the relationships and the aspirations of the character, he's still very much Lex Luthor, but in every other way, he's just Jesse Eisenberg in cheap cosplay. Truthfully, I don't mean to rag on Jesse Eisenberg. As a matter of fact, I think he's a terrific actor when he's in the right role, and it's evident to me that this wasn't the right role for him. The performance he gives isn't a bad performance, but it is an awful Lex Luthor performance. If he wasn't tasked with playing a Luthor, if you were to take the character's name out of the equation entirely, maybe make him somebody else, this would actually be terrific. I think people would look back on this part more fondly. Unfortunately, because this is such a laughably bad interpretation of Lex, it's just become more memeable than it was memorable. Had Jesse Eisenberg been playing the Riddler, this would have been on brand. It would have been a terrific performance, but in terms of being an accurate adaptation of Luthor... WRONG! Actually, you know what? I take it back. Jesse Eisenberg did make for a good Luthor. A good Lenny Luthor.
Oh no.
Which, by the way, I can't take full credit for that observation, as it was actually my friend Sajid who made that comparison, but I will never unsee that now. So, thanks for that. He is the total opposite of the character he's portraying. I think this was a mistake of the casting department, or maybe it was a problem in the creative vision department. But for what it's worth, I think Jesse Eisenberg does make for a good villain. I just think it was a misstep in having him play this particular one. And with all that being said, if you like this video and would be interested in seeing a video on Michael Shannon's time as Zod, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying, "I will find him!" I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.